When life throws you a curveball, how are you going to handle adversity? Welcome to the Fearless Mindset Podcast, where you're about to go on a journey as I interview security, business, and entertainment leaders on what it takes to stay fearless. I'm your host, Mark Ledlow, and enjoy today's episode.
I'm your host, Ken Frownfelter, as you heard in the intro. I have a very special guest today who's actually helping me out with my first podcast, who's kind of a podcast veteran himself, Mr. Mark Ledlow. I think the worst thing that, there's guys that would have the breakdowns and they would have their,
True, yeah.
They would just be, you see them crying over on their bed or whatever. And you're like, you okay? I just, because it's the first time being away from home and everything's fresh and you're tearing that Band-Aid away. And mine came when I got a letter from my dad that said, that I had been getting letters from my great grandpa, and
Right.
I actually still have some of them.
Oh, wow.
And he'd write, say, hey, and he had this really nice handwriting, especially for 94.
Right. That's pretty good.
And so I get a letter. I don't know. We were in phase 2, so we were up at Camp Pendleton.
Right.
And I got a letter from my dad saying that my great grandpa had passed away. And I'm like, okay. And so I go and sit on my rack, and so Hearst comes up to me. And he goes, "Hey, you doing okay?" Because he had the bunk right next to me, but the lower level bunk. And so he sits across from me. He's like, "You okay?" I was like, "Yeah, I just got a letter from my dad. My great grandpa passed away, and I don't know what it was. I think it was just I'd been holding it together, and I just lost it at that point.
Let the floodgates open up.
Yep. And he puts his arm on my shoulder.
Oh, wow.
And he's just like, I'm sorry, man. And the whole thing. Well, I think Richie saw this at some point. Somehow either walked past or whatever the case was.
He saw it.
So this was during free time that this happened. And so they get us online afterwards. At the end of free time, we're getting ready to hit the rack. And Richie's doing his inspection, going down the line, and he stops at me. He goes, "You okay?" I said, I think this was like a night before or night later or 2 nights later or whatever. He goes, "You okay?" I said, "Drill instructor, this recruit doesn't understand what you're asking, what the drill instructor's asking, because you got to be all
Yeah, right.
how you're saying it." He goes, "I saw you breaking down the other day. You okay? I've never seen you break down before." And I said, "I just received some news from my dad. I'm fine though." And my dad had sent me the letter after the funeral, after all the stuff, because he knew that if I had gone. If it was one of those things that I could get out of boot camp for to go deal with,
right,
and he knew that was not going to be beneficial for me. That if I went through that stuff, it wasn't going to be beneficial for me. He goes, "There's nothing you can do. Yes, you can be sad, but you can have a memorial. We'll go to his gravesite after you get out and all this different stuff."
Yeah.
So I said, "Okay, great." But Richie had come up to me. He goes, "You okay?" And I said, "I just got some news from my dad. Do you need some time?" "No, drill instructor, I'm doing okay." Or "This recruit's doing okay." He said, "All right, let me know."
Wow.
And that was it. And then he just moved on. And he never brought it up again. I never brought it up again. I was doing okay. But it was a weird thing that
He sensed.
Yeah. Whether he saw it or whatever it was, I didn't think that I put out the airs of being bummed out or whatever, but
He showed you some sympathy.
yeah.
He showed you that he's human.
Yeah.
And he identified with, he knew you lost somebody.
Right.
He just knew.
Yeah, and so that's the thing. This toughest guy I've ever met in my life, and I think even to this day,
Oh, absolutely.
that's still probably one of the toughest guys I've ever met in my life.
Probably, he was, 30 then?
He had to be about 30 at that time. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, you think about it. He looked older than that, though.
He did. He was
But-
at least 35, 40 maybe.
But he was a staff sergeant and a drill instructor. But he'd been a drill instructor before, and he went back to the fleet and then came back to being a drill instructor, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, you're right. I remember that
So
story.
he'd put some time in.
Yeah.
Oh, and he had a ton of hash marks on his sleeve, too.
Oh, yeah. That guy was,
Yeah, so so he had to be older than 30, easily.
but he had an understanding, compassionate side.
Oh,
of him.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
He's seen some,
Yeah.
he's seen death before. He's probably killed people.
I have no doubt about it.
But for him to show you that empathy and sympathy when you're going,
Mm-hmm.
when your toughest time in boot camp, being what 20, what were you?
I was 18.
18 years old.
Yeah.
Just for that split second, you okay?
Yeah.
Let me
Yeah.
check on you. Make sure you need some
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. That blew me away. So, yeah, boot camp was a different time. You know, it was a weird time. You know, could I imagine going through it now? I'd like to know what I know now.
Oh yeah.
And be able to go through it then. With the body of my 18-year-old self. My knees aren't hurting, my shoulders aren't hurting, my elbows, my back, my wrist, nothing's hurting, right?
Gay in the back, ice the knee in the back of the neck.
Oh, you could do anything you wanted when you were 18. If I have my brain now, not that it's awesome, but compared to my 18-year-old brain.
Just imagine your mental maturity with the body of an 18-year-old going through boot camp.
Mm-hmm.
You would just fly like a jet plane through that.
Be like a Highlander.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
that's
you know, you'll be an immortal, and you know, I
untouchable.
can just have that brain. But I'm 18. I'm 18 forever. I can do whatever. Oh, I can jump off this freaking tower and live and still go and that's. But at 18, you thought you could.
Absolutely.
Remember
Invincible.
Remember the towers? We used to have to go down and
Oh,
rappel and
crap! How tall were those things?
freaking yeah. And so I love that. I loved doing that. That was probably the funnest. And I remember them saying when we first did it, they said, "This is as close to Disneyland as you're ever going to get." And sure enough, I thought so. I thought exactly that.
All I remember is the drill instructor pushing me, and my legs were just literally shaking like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then he got my rope, my harness, and he raised me back and said, "All right, start walking." I was just like,
you're shaking.
I was just shaking because it's going against my natural nature, what I'm supposed to do. I'm not supposed to be going down that far. But once you got the hang of it, you got that belief. You just flew.
Yeah, I had a friend that had gone through it maybe the year before, and he was telling me about stuff. He goes, certain things, you know, look for this, look for that. He said the thing when you do the tower, he goes, just get that arm, throw your arm out there. You have your harness, and you just throw your arm out there, and then when you throw it back behind you, you're going to stop. He goes, just the drill instructors want to see how much courage you got or whatever. Yeah. And he said, just throw your arm out there and leave it out there. I'm like, yeah, but will I just keep going? You'll keep going, but you'll stop as soon as you put it behind you. So when I took off on that thing, I just threw my arm out there. Just remember what he said. I threw my arm out there, and I real fast. He goes, keep your arm out there. It's like, keep my arm out there. No, keep my arm. Okay, wait. So then I get it out there, and I'm like going for a while. Yeah. I'm like, oh, this is getting great. I'm having a lot of fun, and I hit the ground. I'm like, wait a minute, can I do it again? Get over there, you're done.
I'm having too much fun.
I want to go back and do it again.
I want to ride the ride. We're in Disneyland.
Yeah. So it was. Just the minute you get your hang of it, you're done. So
I do the remember the helicopter one we had to do up the helicopter thing, the rails.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
That was my favorite. Going forward.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, I like that. I don't know why. I was like, woohoo.
Yeah, I love the entire thing. The confidence course and the whole thing, climbing those. Sliding down those ropes on your belly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, at that giant angle and stuff.
The physical part was a breeze for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. It was just a piece of cake.
Me too.
Because I remember one of the drill instructors said we were one of the hardest platoons they had to try to break. Because where are you guys all from? Most of us were from Oregon.
Yeah, we had a large group from Oregon. You're right.
We're all athletes. A lot of us were athletes.
Mm-hmm.
And every time they gave us a physical fitness test, we just blew right through it.
Yeah. I was the first person in the 40-20 club, though.
Were you?
Yep.
Oh yeah, you're the quick. Yeah,
I could do the pull-ups, I could do the running, and I could do the sit-ups, and
you just jammed them out.
Yeah. Nowadays,
I don't think I struggled with anything really. I think my biggest problem with boot camp, I think, was the academics.
Yeah.
I think I was I didn't know it, but I was dyslexic.
Oh.
I had no clue. I didn't find out until boot camp that I was dyslexic.
Really?
I turned everything around.
Yeah, I look back and I say, oh, I love doing that. But I look back and say, oh, I don't want to do boot camp again. No, I do want to do boot camp. I wouldn't mind doing it right now, but I love the Marine Corps history.
Right, a lot of history.
That was like easily my favorite part, you know. There's the physical fitness stuff, could I do it like I could do it back then? No. I'm in okay shape.
Yeah, you're in good shape.
Don't get me wrong, I'm in okay shape.
Right.
My 18-year-old self can probably outdo me, but like I said, knee problems, back problems, all these different things that you get when you start getting older. But
you hit 35, you go, what the heck did I do there?
Yeah. So, what did you do after boot camp? Obviously you were in the Marines for a little while, and then you got out, and then
I got out, and then it was weird. Before the Marine Corps, went to college, got my AA degree, and my grade just sucked. They just sucked.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like school. But the minute I got out, they said, hey, just finish up, get out, go active reserve. And so I went back to school. Went back to finish a couple courses at RCC, and then I went full force into working on my bachelor's degree. And then I was working at the Oregon Youth Authority. I was a juvenile corrections officer there, and I did that. And then I was a reserve cop. And then I'm like getting close to ending my stint at college. I was wrapping that all up, the law enforcement stuff, the correction. And I got my degree, and then I'm like, you know what? I'm going to try something else. New season, new chapter in life. So I went into banking.
Mm-hmm.
I did banking for about 4 or 5 years, sales. And then in 2008, the crash came.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? Maybe I should go back into security or something. So just change it up a little bit. So I got daring, I got brave, I got wings, and I just went down into Southern California and got in the private sector security world.
And so doing that, you're for like CEOs and
right,
and people who are maybe politicians or whatever.
Right.
If somebody's coming into the area, is that right?
Yeah, most generally it's official. If it's official business with the Middle East royal family member, they have Secret Service. It's official business. State Department, Security Services usually handles them or Secret Service if it's official business. But typically it would be Middle Eastern families for medical visits or vacation, and they do a little like what we call the tour of the United States. They hit the Hawaii, Denver, and Los Angeles, San Diego, take the kids, and they'd have the nannies, and you'd just babysit.
Would you follow along with them as they go to those different spots, or just when they come into the area in which you're working?
We'd usually we'd follow them into different parts of the country if needed, like Hawaii, or take the private jet, go to Seattle. But most generally, you stayed there or watched their equipment, their personal belongings at a house that they rented out in Beverly Hills.
Right.
And
while they go shopping or whatever.
Exactly.
And you're watching their gear back at their house.
Either watching the gear, because you usually have a security team watch. They call it halls and walls, and so they watch in the hallways and the doors, make sure nobody that didn't belong in there would go in the rooms and rob their stuff. And usually I'd be assigned to the kiddos. We'd be hanging out at Annie's, going to eat ice cream, going shopping, go to Disneyland. I'm like a nanny.
You're wearing a suit going to Disneyland, or did you have to?
No, you're actually wearing t-shirt and shorts sometimes, flip flops,
oh.
tennis shoes.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, or 511s.
Yeah.
Like a polo or something like that.
I guess if it was at their formal events, their gigs or whatever, that's where you're suiting it up.
Red carpet, Hollywood type stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe out of 100 times, maybe 10% of the time I wore a suit. But most of the time I'm just business casual.
Yeah, I guess every time I saw you on Facebook or on Instagram or something like that, you're in a suit. I'm like, geez, you got to wear a suit all the time, but I guess not. It just when the camera's out, yeah, you're looking professional. You're looking.
Yeah, I think there was back then we never did selfies back then.
Yeah.
And I think we do group pictures of a team together or something like that. And I think
yeah, like afterwards, right?
Afterwards.
Like you got the team that you all worked with.
Yeah, the team would go, hey, great job, guys. Thanks for all your work. And then the company we worked for published it on Facebook.
Right, and that's probably where those are photos I was probably seeing. But then I would see every once in a while you take a picture from a balcony of like overlook the ocean or overlooking
some beauty.
Yeah, it was never
nature.
like where you were at the job, but hey, the city that I'm in this week, here's Las Vegas. Hey, check it out. There's Encore or there's Caesars or whatever, or it'd be like Sunset in LA or something like that, which is which is cool.
And that's all that.
Yeah.
You're not disclosing your location or who the client is, because most of the time you have to sign a non-disclosure agreement,
right,
and non-compete agreement, so you don't put anything on social media typically.
Right. Yeah, and I think that would be ridiculous. Obviously, if you're set to try to keep someone safe or protect somebody.
And imagine back then we didn't have Instagram.
Yeah.
Or Twitter.
Yeah, because those are. I mean, we know those. Those are just rare or regular everyday sort of things.
Yeah.
But if you look at it, that sort of stuff it's relatively still fresh. It's still babies.
Yeah.
They're 10 years old, at least in the realm of everybody using it.
Right.
Because I remember when they were first starting to try to determine what the verbiage was called that you were using when you were on Twitter, and somebody, what's the past tense of it? Well, it's a tweet. We all know it's a tweet. Back then, they didn't have a name for it. I remember when they were developing what are we calling that? What are we calling that? So
crazy how it developed over time.
Mm-hmm.
Now these celebrities are getting houses broken into because they know the perpetrator or the person of interest robbing their house. They know where to go because they post where they're at.
Yeah, everybody, and that's a problem. I mean, as good that some of the good that social media does,
right,
there's a negative side to it.
There is.
You have to be cognizant of what you're doing. You have to be aware that you don't just put everything out there.
right.
You don't put your license plate out there. You don't put your address,
Identifiers.
Little things that you don't think about. You don't need to let people know.
And that's a problem that a lot of high-profile clients that we protect, like CEOs and their families, they're bringing in problems with the kids. They have an extreme lifestyle because their parents are rich. And so it's natural for them to be sharing those experiences on Instagram with their friends.
Right.
They don't think there's anything wrong with it.
Right.
But now they're getting picked up, getting robbed, kidnapping, robbery.
Well, and it's just what it is on a grander scale, and it's more billboardy than what it was. You remember watching G.I. Joe when you were a kid?
Oh, yeah.
Back in the 80s, right?
Right.
They had the PSAs at the end of the episode. And there's one PSA, and it had Roadblock.
Yeah.
He was the dude that had the orange pants, and he's the black guy, and he was easily one of my favorites. Anyways, this kid picks up the phone, and the way that it rolled out, this kid picks up the phone and it says, "Hey, you want a prize? Is your mom and dad home?" "No, they're not home." "Well, can I get your address?" "Yeah." Kid gives the address over the phone, right? So he goes outside, wait for this guy, and Roadblock drives by. And he's like, "Hey, Roadblock, check it out. I just won a prize." He's like, "You did? What are you talking about?" And as Roadblock's right there, I mean, he was just this big, burly dude.
Yeah.
This guy in the car drives up and sees Roadblock. He's like, "I'm out," right? Takes off. And he's like, "You told that guy you didn't have your parents weren't home? You never tell I mean, it's just that idea that you, as a kid, my mom used to always tell me, you don't tell anybody, you don't need to answer the phone if we're not home.
Right.
You don't tell anybody you're home alone. You don't go tell anybody before you get home that you're going to be home alone. You just don't need to worry about it, right? So it was that idea. Well, as a kid, I understood that. Now I get to that point where I'm doing things and I'm talking, to people. I don't need to tell anybody where I live. I can say, "Oh, I live here," or "I live there," or whatever. And that's the same thing you would suggest to people on Facebook or on Instagram or Twitter or wherever. You don't put out your personal information, and it's just a safety thing, So,
and you being in law enforcement, you got to be careful of that, especially in the town you live in.
Yeah, exactly. So, we do a lot of things where we don't realize what we're doing.
Absolutely.
And we have to kind of put that into perspective. And the more you grow into something, and sometimes you got to be taught, and sometimes the lesson's hard to learn.
Sometimes.
But hopefully you live through it, and you're able to say, "Okay, well, I'm not going to do that again," and you move on. So
now, graduating, when you got out of boot camp and all that, and did your thing, did you know you'd have a career in law enforcement? Did you know that?
No, because I hurt my knee, got out a little earlier than my contract of the military, and I didn't get into law enforcement for another 11 years.
Wow. Oh, wow.
Probably 11 years after. I started when I was 31, and so
late bloomer.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was one of those things that you got into that. My problem is like I said, I had kids. I had kids when I was 20. I was married, all this different stuff. My ex-wife wasn't overly supportive of me being a police officer, right? She didn't want, whether she didn't want to be married to one or whether she was too worried about me being hurt or something like that. Right. That was the issue, I think. I remember one time she even said, she goes, "You want to wear polyester, you just go be a mailman." Well, that's not the same thing, I guess, but it's a government. You're technically a government employee or whatever,
right.
But that was the thing. So it took me a while to become that, but it was one of those things. I remember when I was in high school, and I was talking to my stepmom at the time, and she was talking, and I could talk to my stepmom. I could always talk to my stepmom about. I don't know. Things were easier to talk to her about.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, she passed away in 2009, so that was kind of a hard thing. Actually, 2010. But I could talk to her. I could sit there, and she would ask me questions. She wanted to see what I was doing with life, and what. So I remember when I was a teenager, she said, "What do you want to do? What do you want to do with life?" And I said, I guess there was a couple things. I said I either want to be a teacher, like a school teacher, and be in like for history, or I want to be in the movies, be a movie star. Yeah, that didn't work out.
A movie star. But your
as
daughter's following that path, isn't she, in New York?
Yeah, she's killing it. She
really?
is,
Doing well?
Well, I mean, obviously, with it's 2020, and so we all know how coronavirus is doing what it does. Shut everything down and whatnot. So.
Yeah, she was on a roll there before.
She was working at this jazz club, getting to know some people. She starts talking about all these people, these famous people.
Sure.
And she came home to visit, and she's like, "Oh, Steve was saying, Steve who? Steve who? Oh, Steve Smith." The Steve Smith. That's kind of a normal name. She goes, "The drummer for Journey." I'm like, oh. Okay. So, but then she would talk about all these other people that came through, that she's met. She's met Leonardo DiCaprio. She's met Ralph Macchio. People come into her restaurants and the places that she's worked, and she's gotten to know these people. Obviously, they're not hanging out on the weekends, sort of thing. But she's gotten to meet these people, and she's actually gotten at this jazz club she was working at. She got to get up on stage a couple times and show off her pipes.
She can sing.
Oh, she is. I couldn't. I don't know anybody that can hold a candle to her.
Whoa.
To be honest with you, I mean, there's famous people out there, sure, but I don't know them. I don't know personally. I mean, I know some people that can sing pretty well, but my daughter can sing really well. She went to school for what's it called? Musical theater, and so it's just she just nailed it. Killed it, and she's early 20s. She's got some growing to do. She's got some learning to do. Overall, she's a great kid. So she's but as a kid, when I was going back to my story, what I was saying was when I was in high school, I was telling my stepmom I want to be a teacher, or be a history teacher, or I want to be a movie star, or I'd like to be a police officer, be a cop. Not even thinking anything about it. And I was following the okay, well, I can't afford to go to school, and I am not smart enough to get any kind of scholarships or anything like that. So military sounds pretty good. So I'd go in the military, right? And that was my plan. Yeah. Do what I needed to do there. Obviously, other things happen. So I'm going through in my 20s, and I'm trying to talk to my wife. My wife at the time, and I'm saying, hey, why don't you go be a mailman, all this different stuff. And I was like, that's not what I want to do.
Right.
I mean, I think I just want to drive fast and carry a gun. That's
nice.
But
that's a simple answer.
Yeah, it's a simple answer, but obviously I know there's way more to that. There's more to it. So as I'm going through things, life just got in the way, did some stuff. When I got to a point where after I got divorced, it was I didn't have somebody that was not supportive of it, right? And I think it was just her thing. She just didn't want to. She was worried about me, either scared for me, or she was, I don't know, whatever the case was. But it got to that point where I didn't have that thing. Like, okay, I'm not disappointing somebody. I'm not letting them down. Right. Now that I'm divorced, so I'm single. I go, I test out, and sure enough, I get the job.
Congrats.
Become a copper.
Nice.
And been doing that now for darn near 14 years.
Congratulations from a bad knee.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's it obviously it gets me every once in a while, but overall,
I see you're all over the place driving around.
I'm able to do my job. Yeah.
I even approached you at the Grants Pass courthouse when they had the little protesting thing going on down there, and
they had some protests going on.
Working hard out
like
there,
that,
and everybody's on their point, and hey, they're a devil dog, and they go, oh, this guy knows them.
Oh yeah.
I had to give a code because I know they're going to try probably
everybody's wanting to
push
know.
me down on the ground and put cuffs on me and then ask me questions later.
No. I don't know, man. I tell you, that day we did the protests. We had the protests from, it was like I said, 2020, when we had protests were going crazy all over the place.
Exactly.
Sure, it comes down to a little town, and I think I hugged more people that day than I've hugged my entire career put together. More people came up and hugged us, shook my hand.
Nice.
And I mean on both sides. On both sides of the street, because one side of the street it was all these very, everybody had a AR strapped to their back and all this different stuff. The other side was BLM and it was,
right.
Everything else. But I have developed relationships with people, and I knew so many people that I was able to just go up to them. I'm like, hey, how you doing? Like, oh my gosh, thank you for being here. And they give us hugs.
Cool.
And I think a lot of the officers I was working with did the same thing.
Wow.
So it was just really strange. So all this stuff that you see up in Portland, Seattle, or all these burning and looting and all this different stuff, which it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. I'm sure there could have easily been a seed planted for that. I don't know if it didn't happen. Whatever the case was, it didn't happen here. And I was able to go up there and utilize the ability that I had of developing those relationships and showing these people, we care about you. We want you to exercise your First Amendment right. We want you to exercise that thing that I, years ago, raised my right hand and said, I will defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I said that, right?
Yeah.
And that even follows, because there's no exit to that.
No.
There's no expiration on that.
Right.
And, when we did that relationship is still there today. So I have to sit there and look back and be like, and that's what life is. Life is building your relationships.
Yeah.
And that's how you get things, and that's how you work through things. And, I hear people say, well, isn't that kind of manipulation? Mm-hmm. And it's not manipulation. Manipulation is, well, I guess it is. No, I'll take it back. Yeah, I think it is manipulation. But if you apply a negative meaning to it, manipulation can be bad. If you just apply what you're doing. Now, if I say, hey, I will give you $1 million if you go over there and you bust a hole through that wall. Am I manipulating you into busting a hole in that wall? No, I'm offering you something that works for your benefit. Because sure, you can find a use for $1 million, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. So you're not manipulating anybody. So as you go through, if I'm trying to work towards the mission and work towards getting the mission of making sure people are safe, making sure people are happy, making sure I can help somebody, make sure that they can be a better person, then let's work that relationship.
Absolutely.
And if I have to manipulate you to the point where you're like, oh, I get it. Okay, now. Oh yeah. So I'm going to do that. Will you be mad at me if I manipulate you into doing something that's beneficial for you? And that's not to say, hey, I'm doing this, I'm killing you for your own good. That's not what I mean by it, but there's that level of, so developing relationships is the ultimate goal that we should want to do. So